Welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get started to make sure we respect everyone's time. This will also allow folks to continue to sign on. My name is Rob Rittberg. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at OpenClinica. Ben Bauman was not able to attend, so I'll be kicking off the webinar in his place. Today's webinar is entitled Offline Data Capture for OpenClinica, Demo of MyForms Tablet Integration. I'm really excited by the innovation that is happening throughout our community, and this integration is a perfect example of the power and the freedom that open source has to offer. The OpenClinica tablet integration is brand new, and I hope you find this information interesting and useful. For those of you that are early adopters, please feel free to reach out to me or to the gentleman at MICO with any questions. Before we start, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. This presentation will run approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes of Q&A. Please feel free to note your questions during the presentation, and they will be covered during the Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to today's presenters. With us from MICO, we have Gautam Pandiyan, VP of Sales and Marketing, and Chris DiPiero, Director of Software Development. Gentlemen, you have the stage.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody that's joined the webinar. Much appreciated. My name is Gautam Pandiyan. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing at MICO. Today's webinar is titled Tablet-Based Offline Data Capture for OpenClinica. So we're excited about the innovative work we're doing with OpenClinica, and we're here to tell you a little bit about it. In terms of the agenda today, I will be giving you a quick overview of some of the things MICO has been doing, some examples of customers that have been doing offline data capture in their infectious disease and other kinds of trials. And I'm going to leave it to Chris at the end of the session to go over the actual demonstration that shows the two systems working together. And like Rob said, this is certainly the beginning. We intend to continue this innovation, and certainly, based on your engagement with us, we'll certainly take it a step further as needed as well. So we'll share some contact information at the very end. For the moment, the speakers you've got today, you heard from Rob earlier. We've got some lovely little pictures for you so you know who you're talking to. Chris is going to give you the demo later, and I'm the guy in the middle talking to you. So thanks again for attending the session. I'm going to go off and start off with introducing MICO. MICO has been in business for about 13 years, and that whole time we've been focused on data capture solutions for mobile devices. So that's been our sweet spot. We pride ourselves on very flexible technology that helps you capture any type of data on any device and send it pretty much anywhere it needs to go. We produce some very scalable, secure technology that can be scaled up and down as needed. And we do a lot of work with companies like Intel and Microsoft. And this year we were actually Microsoft's 2013 Life Sciences Innovation Award winner in clinical research. The technology we produce is FDA compliant as well as HIPAA compliant for Part 11 regulations. And there's a number of US-based patents that we've issued around the technology as well. So there's quite a bit of innovation in this space, leadership from the early days, from even before tablets were even heard of in the mainstream market. And so we're quite a wealth of expertise doing these kinds of projects. So with that, that's an introduction to MICO. Some of the customers that we worked with over the years range across the board from academic medical centers to large hospital systems, pharmaceutical companies, infectious disease sites, a number of different folks and different kinds of use cases. And they've all used the technology in very different ways. So what we'll talk to you today about is a platform that can be customized to meet your specific needs. So usually, most of the customers we encounter, they've got a process that looks like this. It starts off with some kind of paper, whether that's printed from Word or PDF, or it's a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy that you can't even see the ink on it anymore. Well, you take that paper, you send it out to people, they go off in the field, do their trials, capture data in their remote environments. That paper then has to be mailed, or it's got to be carried over to someone that scans it or types it into a database or Excel or the OpenClinica in this case, right? And then puts away that paper copy and maintains a source document. So that's kind of what this whole process looks like for most of our customers. Well, it turns out that's a pretty costly, inefficient process because it costs a good amount of money just to process all those things. There was an industry white paper that looked at the cost and said it was about $5 to do all that, just from a processing standpoint alone. We're not talking about the queries and the other things that affect the cost, from the value of being able to finish a trial faster, being able to do a number of other things, remote source data monitoring, a number of other things as well. So when you can imagine, when you start using tablets and mobile devices to do this, you can cut out a bunch of steps. And that's going to, by default, save you just a tremendous amount of time, money, and bring a lot more efficiencies to the table, without even accounting for things like better accuracy, lower query rates, and other things that happen to be benefits as well. So having said that, this is a kind of efficiency we bring to most of our customers, and we'll talk about one or two specific examples in a few minutes. So the technology that we've developed over 13 years of doing this is called MyForms. It's a mobile capture platform that quite simply helps you build electronic form applications like your case report forms and your clinical site monitoring forms and consent forms and various types of forms, and make them as simple or complex as needed. Put these business rules, edit checks, and logic checks on those forms so they're really applications that live and breathe and provide the kind of accuracy you're looking for, and take that data and send it to EDCs like OpenClinica. And today we're going to focus on the integration with OpenClinica because we see that as a powerful way to leverage a complete end-to-end solution here. So the architecture of the system, the way it's all fitting together, you've got your paper forms that you're working with currently. You can take that, put it through our design tool, which is a WYSIWYG drag and drop tool. That's something that you can own, something that you can purchase and use to design all your CRFs and your studies, and you don't have to be hostage to the vendor providing that as a service. So you can get trained on how to use this technology. It's a WYSIWYG drag and drop technology with some scripting capabilities as well. Now, what that does is it lets you actually take the designed CRF or other kind of application, put it up on the MyForms server product. The MyForms server product can live in the cloud, or it can live on premise at the actual server machine that you control. So it's within your premises, you control the data, you control all of that. The server product serves a few different purposes. It helps you manage all the versions of the forms you've created. It helps you manage all the users in the system. It also helps you with authentication and workflow and a number of other things. So what it does is it connects to your OpenClinica system. It can pull down and actually pre-populate various forms onto devices. So those forms can be filled out on the devices, and they can be done, again, here's the key part of the session today, completely offline and disconnected from the internet as well. So it provides you with that elegant offline data capture with syncing that is so key for some of these trials in areas like infectious diseases. So when that's done on any type of device, including multiple kinds of tablets, laptops, including this digital pen device on a piece of paper, so you've got all these options in front of you. And sometimes devices like this digital pen device might be a good fit for you depending on the kind of remote environment that you're in. When all that is said and done, when you do have a connection to the internet, you can sync back the data to the MyForms server. It gets put into an approval workflow. So somebody sitting in data management or supervisor can actually pull up the data, review it. If they have any problems with it, make comments, send it back to the people in the field. This can go back and forth a couple of times. And at the end of the day, when the approver approves it, all that can be exported to wherever it needs to go in pretty much any format, including various CDISC ODM formats, including into OpenClinica. And this integration is kind of what we're going to show you today. So this is the general architecture of our system. All of this is written on top of our own .NET SDK. And so there's some powerful abilities to take our SDK and do some customization with it as well. So keep that in mind. And part of the idea of showing you this is to help you understand the platform here that can be customized just the same way OpenClinica can be customized as an open source platform. Now, I won't stop and ask if there's any questions at the moment, but I will encourage you to chat any questions that you've got through the chat window. We will be monitoring it, and we'll make sure to try and answer your questions either at some point during the session or at the end. So please do use your chat window. If you can't find it, it's right up here on the top. This is where you can pull down your chat and chat your question to everybody, or you can chat it to the presenters on today, and we'll make sure we monitor the chat window. So hopefully the architecture of the MyForms platform is making sense to you guys. A couple of key things to mention about working with Myco. Not only do we offer a very flexible technology platform that lets you capture any type of data. We're talking about handwriting recognition, taking photographs, scanning barcodes, voice recognition commands, GPS signals. Imagine going on a nutritional survey study in any part of Africa where you're going household to household and surveying patients. Wouldn't it be pretty useful to capture the GPS coordinates for every single CRF and when it was filled out at what location? So we're talking about rich data capture here. So that's the kind of flexible data capture that our platform can accommodate. So that's pretty useful from even if you're not doing it today's standpoint, from a future standpoint. And the fact that Myco has been doing this for 13 years around tablet solutions means we've acquired a wealth of experience around best practices, around deploying these kinds of solutions. So that's something else that can be a powerful value add to your projects. Now, flexibility is important. It should be top of your mind. If it's not, we ran a survey in December and we asked 10,000 people, what is the most important thing for you when it comes to picking technology like this? And you'll see flexibility just jumps off the chart compared to everything else. So it kind of gives you an idea about the importance of flexibility in your data collection. And that goes right back to this, having all these options on the table. So you don't want to be stuck to one device, one kind of operating system, one platform. You want to have the options of using a wide variety of different devices because study to study, you might have different parameters to work with. So keep that in mind. This BYOD environment and the diverse environment of your trials is supported by this kind of technology. You could do a number of things, right? You could go and purchase a vertical software package. You can use a custom app development shop. And there's trade-offs with all of that. And there's surveys that show different kinds of trade-offs or different pieces of that. In some cases, some packages are not as suited for that mobile use case. Some cases, it takes a lot of time and energy to develop something from scratch. So we position this sort of a category, which is mobile forms capture, as a good bolt-on to OpenClinica to offer you this offline capture in the field. That's very powerful. I do want to go through a couple of quick customer examples, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chris to actually walk you through a live demonstration. One of the customers we worked with lately and we won the Microsoft 2013 Life Sciences Innovation Award for is the Infectious Disease Clinical Research Program. And they're a network of DoD sites, and I've borrowed some slides from their presentation to share with you here, that did clinical trials on Army bases around the world where they had to be offline in disconnected environments. And so they're facing the exact same challenge that a lot of you probably are. They actually were able to reduce the paperwork on their trial from about 20,000 pieces of paper down to only about 500. And they're planning to eliminate that as well. The benefits for them of using this kind of technology, they've got about 100 times fewer queries from using this kind of technology. They've saved about 50% of their time they used to spend on data entry from having that electronic source. And most of their CRCs have just taken to this and adopted it incredibly. So this has been an enormously successful project. We've trained them on how to use this technology. They've used most of it on their own. And you can see the kind of benefits that they've experienced. And I've got a few more slides about their specific project here as well. More specifically, some information about where they went with some of their trials. They're based out of Maryland, but they did some of their trial sites were all around the world in areas like Afghanistan, Djibouti, and a number of other places. So they did conduct trials in some remote parts of Army bases where they could not tap into internet connectivity. And their forms, a part of what Myco's technology brings to the table is this whole paper-like user interface. So it looks and feels like paper, but it gives you so much more functionality and flexibility to it. So for users, it's pretty simple. It looks like paper. They can use it like paper. So it really makes their life easier. You can hide subforms within major forms. You can also start to add CSV files and other kinds of data sources for lookup of information that you can use to look up information and pre-populate all those forms right from the eCRF or electronic source. Specifically, too, you can export a number of different kinds of documents that you can, if you so chose, keep locally as well for reference when you're offline and disconnected as well. You can also start to look at historical values and pick a number of different kinds of exports that you want to send and where you want to send those exports, including to OpenClinica as a powerful place to deposit those exports and manage the queries and do other things of that sort. So in their particular use case, they saw significant savings in using this kind of system. They were able to use a scripting engine in our technology to make sure everything was accurate in the validation rules. And we've also got a drop-down editor for validation rules that Chris is going to show you briefly that makes sure information is correct, accurate, and nothing is missing. And the paper-like user interface here means that this is so much easier compared to this traditional EDC data collection window or the non-paper-like format. Another customer that's seen similar success is the National Institute of Health. They've used the technology in the infectious disease group again, well, on Android tablets, and they've gone paperless as well, and with their principal investigators being ecstatic about the use of these technologies. And they're using a lot of the workflow in our system and a number of other things that go along with it in a number of remote sites as well. So you'll start to see the whole theme of infectious diseases kind of emerge pretty strongly here. In terms of security in the system, we take that pretty seriously as part of our commitments to meeting the Part 11 compliance. Certainly, we are meeting standards using technologies like HTTPS posts and SSL certificates. Data is encrypted in transmission. On any given form, we are tracking who was logged in on what device, at what time, what location, when it was started and finished. On every single ink stroke, we are timestamping it and pressure stamping it with a complete set of audit trails. Sessions are hashed, and authentication is controlled in a number of ways, including compatibility with Active Directory for single sign-on. And the technology has been validated and tested by a number of customers in all kinds of areas of the life science business that have satisfied themselves that we're meeting compliance and security requirements that they've got. So that's, in a nutshell, a bit about the technology, a bit about our company, a bit about a couple of customers that have had a great amount of success using this technology. We'd love to engage with you in a very similar way to help you meet the same kind of success, to help you get 100 times fewer queries, 50% data entry savings, and get your trials done faster in a paperless way, even when you're disconnected from the internet. So I'll stop there. I'll see if there's any questions, either on chat or on the phone, and I'll start to transition this to Chris DiPiero, our Director of Software Development, who is one of the experts that's been at MICO for 13 years, helping develop this kind of technology, who's been on the forefront of tablet adoption. And we're pleased to have him here today to help us go through an actual demo of the integration that we've done between MyForm's data capture and OpenClinica's EDC system.
Thank you, Gautam. So I'm going to share my desktop in just a second here. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I don't know if there's anything that you see there. All right, let's just keep going forward. So Gautam, I'm going to ask you, can you see my desktop now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So in Gautam's presentation, he talked about oftentimes people start from paper forms and bring them through our system. But today, we're going to actually kind of show a round trip through OpenClinica where we already have maybe a study definition. So OpenClinica was nice enough to host this demo server. And what I'm going to do is log in as an administrative user over here. And several of you, I'm sure, are probably already familiar with this interface. But you may or may not know that I can go under the Tasks menu here, view the data sets, and ultimately what I'm going to do is produce all the, export all the physical exam data. So if I click on my export data set, you'll notice that I have the ability to export in a few varieties of CDisc-ODM. I'm going to pick 1.3 clinical data, say run now, and this is going to generate that, and I can just go back to my data sets here and download it directly. So when I do this, this is going to create a zip file, and actually that's not quite where I wanted to put that. Let me save it somewhere else. I save it over here and open that folder. I can unzip that directly here. And what I get from this is an XML file that's going to describe our study. So if I bring up just a standard text editor, and I have all of my pieces over in this directory right here. If I bring that up, we'll see that we've got a CDiscODM formatted XML file. It looks a little sloppy in this editor, but ultimately what we have is a series of item definitions that are going to define this study. Now, we've taken the liberty of cleaning this up just a little bit because we actually don't really, for the purposes of this demo, care about the entirety of the study. We actually only want to care about a single event. This is that same file reformatted just a little bit and cleaned up a bit. So from there, what I'm going to do is bring up our design tool. Now, Gotham showed you that block diagram that indicated there's essentially three parts of our system. We have the design side, where you're going to create your electronic forms applications. We have your server, where they're going to be hosted and distributed out to your mobile devices. And, of course, we have our client-side devices. So to start with, though, what we'll do is we say that we want to create a new form application here. So we say, we'll give it a name and a description. And now I could go and just start adding fields from my palette over here on the left and just dragging them onto the form, but we created this study definition for a reason. If I go under my my data palette menu and pick Add Data Palette, you'll see one of our options is CDiscODM. When I do that, it's going to give me a chance to browse for these XML files, and when it parses it apart, it's going to show us information that is contained inside that file. In this case, we have this registration visit study event, and that in and of itself contains 3 CRFs, but for the purposes of what we're going to take a look at here, we mostly care about the physical exam. So if I select that, it's going to then take a look at that CRF and find fields that are on it. Now, you may have noticed in the background, it's actually done a few things without us even really having to interact with our design software at all. It's added some fields that we would call hidden fields, and these are to store some meta information about the study itself, such that we don't have to go and explicitly add them to our form. So it's done that for us. But from there, it's showing us that we have a few required fields that we do have to add ourselves, a set of physical exam sort of grouped together fields, and then there's, in this case of this CRF, there's a few other fields that are grouped together as well. Now, what it's showing us is that it has gone through this. It's picked out actually the captions of these fields, and it's displaying us kind of a friendly name for all of them. But now it's waiting for us to take these and do something with them. So if I take, for instance, the subject OID, I can just take that, drag it onto my form canvas, and what we'll see is it wants to create this as what we would call a constrained text field. And it doesn't, in this case, have a lot of templating information, but I'm going to say, okay, it's going to just drop that right on the form, and I'd be good to go. Now, that might be fine. I might not need to make any modifications at all. However, I could have changed this and said, you know, our subject OID is probably only going to be numeric, so, and rather than 20 characters, maybe I know it's going to be 10 or something like that, and I can make those changes as well. Now, you'll notice in the actual palette that we were dragging out before, that field has sort of become grayed out. That's because it's indicating to us that we've already added this field to the form. As I go through, if I decide that I made a mistake, I didn't really want that field to be in that format, I could go ahead and just delete it from the form itself. You'll notice it's now available for us to drag out again onto the form. And in fact, I might say, you know, rather than using that type of form field, I might want to use a different type. So if I right-click on it, it shows us other possibilities that we could use. So I could say, you know, instead of using a text field, let's use an ink edit field. And when I drag that, that's more along the lines of your standard kind of edit field. It's called an ink edit field because on appropriate platforms we can actually do handwriting recognition in it, but it doesn't have the specific constraints imposed upon it. Now, as I get into the fields that might have some useful constraints on them, I can take a look at ones like this. I happen to know that this is the caption for our date field, our physical exam date. So if I drag that onto the field, onto the form, you'll notice that it's already populated with a date template. In this case, a 4-digit year, then -2 mm for month, and then 2DD. And when I drag that, we see right here it's on the form with that specification already good to go. I can do the same sort of thing with my height fields. In this case, it knows it's a numeric field. It's being a little bit generous with the template. I probably, certainly in height and inches, don't need that many characters, so I could chop some of those off if I needed to and say okay, and so on. Now, I don't want to bore you guys on this demo here, so what we did is we spent a little bit of time and already used this ODM file to generate a more fleshed out form template. Now, I'll show you though, if I go to the data palette and look at you'll see that I have my physical exam English here, and it's that exact same one. If I expand now, you'll see pretty much all the fields have been dragged out onto the form. We've used a variety of field types over here just to kind of show some different ways in which we can capture data on different platforms, but we've formatted them in ways that we think are probably pretty appropriate for that data to be captured. Now, this form is ready to go. I could go deploy it onto one of our servers and download it and so on, but it's probably useful for me to add some level of validation. Now, I'll close this palette just for a moment, and if I double-click on my subject field, you'll notice that I've got a very simplistic checkbox here that just says this field is required. This is as simple as rules come. You know, this field can't be empty. And of course, if we're going to import this data back into OpenClinica, we need our subject and, in fact, our location as well to be required. And in fact, there's probably some other required fields here as well. But our validation rules don't end here by any means. So I'll say OK to that. But if I go to my File menu and look at validation rules, I'm going to get sort of a drag-and-drop wizard sort of way to add different rules. Now, I've taken the liberty of adding a couple of rules already, but we'll go take a look at them to see what's possible. In this case, we're defining a blood pressure rule. Now, in the form, you may have noticed that the blood pressure is actually split across two different fields, the systolic and diastolic fields. So what we're actually doing here is we're doing a couple of comparisons. We're saying that the systolic must be greater than 110 and less than 140, and the diastolic must be greater than 70 and less than 90. This mirrors what OpenClinica actually already has as a rule for this study. We wanted to make sure that the same rule is enforced, not when we try to export the data back into OpenClinica, but actually at the point of capture, right? The whole point of this demonstration is that we can do this all offline. Now, obviously, on a WebEx, we are online while we're doing all this, but any validation rule that we define here in the designer is going to be evaluated on the tablet device at the point of capture, and it's going to be the user is going to be notified of any rule violation that takes place. But we're not limited to just sort of numeric constraints. We can actually, even just without writing any code, through our interface here, write if-then rules as well. So in this case, you may have noticed after the divide, we have quite a few places where we can note appearances, or I should say note conditions of different physical exam characteristics for a patient. In this case, what we're saying is that if the appearance field contains abnormal, and by the way, we've made our appearance field a drop-down list from the palette here instead of actually having to fill it in text ourselves. But if we're saying if that contains the contents of abnormal, then the comments field that's associated with it must not be empty. And that's a fairly simplistic if-then rule, but we're not writing any code to make this happen. We're just going right here through our wizard and we're adding this rule. You might notice down at the bottom left, we're calling these critical rules, and we're saying to highlight the field as well. Critical rules in our world are ones that will prevent you from submitting the data. So in other words, if that rule is violated, when I say I'm done with this form and I want to submit it through the system, it'll tell us, no, you can't do that because there is a violation of some sort. If I were to say that it was non-critical instead, that would act more as a warning, and it would tell you, hey, there is this rule, and maybe you should pay attention to these fields, but it won't prevent you from submitting it. Highlighting the field is just typically a way to get the person's attention. If you just have a rule on the form without really notifying the person, they can certainly see it in the list of rules that are violated on the form, but usually you want to bring their attention directly on the form itself to see that you're good to go. Now, if we want to be more sophisticated, we can. So we actually have the ability to add scripting directly inside of our forms themselves. If I go to File Script, I'll get a VB.NET script editor, and I only want to show this because I'm actually setting the BMI field through a little bit of script code here. Basically, we have an API that allows you to interrogate all of the fields for their value, set fields from that. Now, I could have actually written that rule in the validation rule editor as well, but I did it in that script editor just to show you that we have that flexibility as well. There are events that fire through the form's lifecycle, and you're able to handle those. Now, I'm not going to add any more rules. I don't want it too much of a pain for us to fill it out during a demo. But what I do from this point is I can say, go ahead and upload this to our MyForm server. It tells me that it needs to be saved and exported. And I say that's good to go. I upload it. And Gotham mentioned that our server manages form revisions. That is to say, anytime you make an update to a forms application, any of the clients that connect to it will automatically download the latest update to that without you having to email them or push it out in some sort of other way. So we're good to go here. So I'm going to say OK to that. And now what I'm going to do is I have an iPad here that I'm going to show this on first. And I've got a screen mirroring utility. So I'm going to drag that over to my shared window. And what I'm going to then interact with is our client-side application on the iPad. So this is just downloaded from the App Store. I have configured it with our credentials already, so we're not going to have to go enter our server settings. But from here, I'm going to go ahead and log in. And you'll see that it synchronizes the physical exam form. It had already synchronized prior because I had run this application before, but you notice we published revision 17 from the designer, and you'll see that that mirrors what we see here on the device at this point. When I tap on that, we're going to start that form. Now, Gotham already mentioned we have sort of a page-based layout, and that extends across all of our platforms, the iPad, the Windows devices, and Android devices as well. In fact, if I tap on an area outside of this page, it'll show us that this form's got 2 pages. I didn't really show the second page in the designer because it's pretty much the same as the first page, but we see here that I can navigate to my second page by tapping on it. I can swipe between pages, although that's hard to see on a WebEx, but that was a swipe from the second page to the first page. But here we see now on the first page we're ready to enter some data. Now, I talked about the highlighting of the fields prior already. You see that the subject OID, the location OID, and the blood pressure fields are highlighted in yellow to grab our attention. We also have some pre-fill taking place in this form. We've pre-filled the date of the exam and the time of the exam based on the current date and time, and that's fine for our purposes here. So what I'm going to do is tap the subject OID. I'm going to pick one of our SSCAM 107. Pick one of the locations, and now I'm good to go to actually enter some data. So if I just tap on my height field there, you should notice that I get a little bit of a flashing cursor that's enabling me to go ahead and enter data here, and I get the numeric keypad to pop up at the bottom, the virtual keypad on the device. So if I say that the patient is, say, 65 inches and weighs 155 pounds, and then move over to the temperature field, you'll notice that my body mass index got populated with 25.8. That's just using that calculation that I showed you in the script editor. If I say they're running a bit of a fever, maybe they're 101.1, they have a pulse rate of 65, a respiration of 23. Now finally here though, when I get to my blood pressure, I mentioned earlier that we have this rule that keeps these in range. And I'm going to say that they have, say, 130 over 85, and when I leave that field, I believe that should be in range. Actually, I think 100, there we go, yeah. So the fields become unhighlighted in yellow because they're good. And then I can continue down filling out other physical characteristics. So their appearance, they're normal, this is normal as well, their skin's normal, and so on. Now, you remember, though, I added an if-then rule on appearance. So if I go back to appearance and say that they're abnormal, you'll notice that both that drop-down list as well as the comments field turn yellow because now I've got a validation rule on them. And by the way, since this is an iPad, of course, I can zoom in on it with a pinch gesture. I can go to my comments and here and just say my comments. I don't really know what an appropriate comment here might be to make, but when I do that, you'll see that the fields become unhighlighted just like the blood pressure fields were before. If I tap back up outside of my pages, I get a menu at the top, and what I'm going to do here is tap the Finish button, and that's the equivalent of submit in our world. So it's taking this data and it's submitting it on up to the system. Now, I mentioned right now, obviously we're doing this all online, so what's happened is it's taken the data and it's exported it up to our server application where a data export can be run. Now, if this was offline, all my validations would still take place, but of course I wouldn't transmit it to the server directly at that time. I would wait till I was back on the network. I'm going to move my iPad sharing window out of the way. Actually, I'm going to resize it accidentally, but I have a second monitor that I'm trying to move it out onto. All right, tell you what, I'll just turn off sharing on the iPad itself instead, just to get rid of it there. Now, if I bring up that same text editor that I had before, we actually have this set up to export to a specific folder. Now, I actually skipped a little piece of the demo that I should have shown you over here on the design side, but when I was in my data palettes before, there's a checkbox near the bottom here that says Enable Automatic Data Export for this data palette, and it's asking me whether it wants to do it on the client side, the server side, and then file name, and we can do substitutions in our file name as well. So in this case, we said we wanted to do it server side, and we wanted to export it to this folder, DDC OpenClinica example OpenClinica export. And that is the file that I opened right here in my text editor. You should hopefully see the values that we entered before, like our temperature of 101.1, our pulse of 65, and so on. So this, just like our form definition, is a CDISC ODM formatted XML file, which means that if I go back to OpenClinica at this point, and under the Tasks menu pick Import Data, I can just browse to that file. Tell it to continue. OpenClinica will run some of its own validation checks, of course, and it shows us the data that we're importing at this point. And we continue from there, and it's going to tell us that we're going to overwrite the data that might have already been in there. I've done quite a few tests on this study already, so of course it will. And taking a look, it was CAM 107 that we had used as our patient. So if I go ahead, as our subject I should say, come here, we see that we have a green check mark by it. If I look at the data here, we see that the data that I entered is all captured there. And if I go to the body tab, we see my comments because of the abnormal appearance. Now, one thing, however, that Myco prides itself on is that we are very much multi-platform. I showed you this running on an iPad, but I can take that same form definition and actually run it on a Windows device. So if I launch our Windows client, it's going to ask me to log in. I'm going to log in with the exact same user. It's going to synchronize with the same server and provide the exact same form template available to us here. And in this case, I'm running on a desktop device. You can use our application certainly on tablet devices, but you can also run them on traditional laptops and desktops with keyboard and mouse. The same rules are running. We see the highlighting, sort of a yellow border around the subject OID and the location, and we see, of course, the blood pressure fields are highlighted. I have my same drop-down options here, my same pre-fill. The difference that I do get available here is that this platform is very much suitable for handwriting recognition. So, for instance, I'm going to do this with a mouse, so please pardon my terrible recognition here, my terrible handwriting, I should say. But if I go ahead and write in with a stylus or a mouse or other device, I can go ahead and do so. Now, you notice accidentally, I wrote this, and the way we're treating this field is treat as number field. So what I can do, just go ahead and change that. If I had a stylus with an eraser, I can do that as well. And then if I go ahead and say write in weight, we'll get the same body mass index calculation that we had before. Same form, same definition, same logic behind it, same concept applies. I have a menu down near the bottom that I could finish the form with. WebEx makes it a little bit tricky to bring up that menu, but I'm able to submit this form through our server workflow and send it off ultimately back up to OpenClinica. And just like on the iPad, this can be done all offline, so I could synchronize my form definitions when I'm at the office and then go out into the field or a very remote location, as Gautam talked about, do it all and then come back to some sort of network connectivity later and export it from there. So that's basically our round trip. We exported a study definition from OpenClinica. We designed it in our form definition with a little bit of a speed up just to make sure that we could do it all here in the context of this demo. And then we showed that same form definition on 2 different platforms, and we're able to export the data and import it back into OpenClinica as study data. That's basically what I've got to show. So if there are questions at this point, I'd certainly be able to field those, and I'm sure Gautam could handle some as well if you have some for him.
Quick question, guys. If you jump in, Chris, thank you for going over that. That was very helpful. Could you speak for a moment or two about some of the flexibility in terms of, this is one integration that we put together with a certain kind of round trip, but with inherently in the MyForm system, the flexibility, what are other potential scenarios of ways we can interact with OpenClinica and other possibilities in the system?
Sure. So this is obviously showing a case where we are manually driving the export of the ODM and the import back of the study data. We could do this in more of a batched sort of way. After all, we are just dealing with XML files here, so we could certainly place them in a known location, and then at a certain scripting time, we could pull those into OpenClinica from there. In general, MyForms, of course, there has other communications channels available to it, such as database exports, either through ODBC or native SQL client or something like that. And of course, we can also interact with web services as well. And I'll be honest, I don't know all of the channels that are available on OpenClinica, so maybe Rob can speak to that. But we can take the data that's captured from any of our platforms and transmit it over several different export methodologies. And I should say, we can do several at once. In this case, we're only producing that XML file, but if we also needed to produce a PDF or something like that, we could do that from that same form definition at the same time. Does that answer your question, Gautam?
Yes, thank you. And I know there was a question on the chat window about, do we have to design each CRF twice? And the answer is, it really depends. In this integration prototype, we've shown you a prototype of how it can kind of work, and for the sake of a prototype. But certainly, like Chris was saying, things can be automated as much or as little as needed. And there are some other tools kind of in our future development and other things that are going to lend to some universal design tools and other things that will make that even easier. So it's a matter of preference to some extent, a matter of customization to some. And so the answer is you don't have to, but at the moment today, you probably have to do some of that.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. We certainly have done some automated form generation with other data palettes as well. And I'll say that will tend to get you most of the way there. There's certainly sometimes some tweaks for specific platforms, even in the automated side of things that you might need to do. But we're trying to continue to further our integration such that there'll be a minimum amount of overlap between defining your studies and your CRFs.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. Any questions, folks, on the technology, on demos, on any of the experiences we've had doing this for 13 years with a number of customers? We're open to hearing any of those, either via chat or you're all unmuted as well. You're welcome to jump up and ask us questions on the phone as well. Rob, you got anything you want to add?
Actually, I just wanted to say this was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I haven't seen this myself, so it was very enlightening and very useful. It kind of exciting on how easy it is to, import back into OpenClinica. So.
Great. Well, guys, we don't want to keep anybody longer. I've always been a believer, and if you can wrap up a meeting earlier, then go ahead and do it. So we'll maybe call this thing short a little bit, and we'll follow up with you. And Rob, maybe you'll be following up with everybody as well. So we certainly look forward to engaging in individual conversations with you, trying to bring the same success to you of trying to reduce your queries by 100 times and reduce your data entry saving time by 50%. So we're all in conjunction and working with OpenClinica as well.